Recording. Welcome to day 2. We're going to talk about the great limiting belief hoax today. Super excited about that. I get to go on a little bit of a rant. And I'll just warn you, I might trigger some things. So just prepare yourself. I'm not a bad person. I love you no matter what, but there may be some things that I have spent a lot of time researching and a lot of time diving into. And remember that question your assumptions. That's the only reason that I'm going to share the things that I'm going to share, is that I didn't just take it at face value. I spent years and years diving into it. And all I'm asking is that you just give it a little chance, and that maybe there's going to be a breakthrough on the other side of that. So that's my little rant. And again, it was super fun. There's 2 people from Ireland on this call. Like, how cool is that? Please do introduce yourself and where you're calling in from, because you might find that there's somebody who lives down your, on your street or something. Like, you just never know. And that's really fun. But, and if you're listening to the replays too, feel free to, post something in the Mindful Millionaire community. While the whole community hasn't been invited to this, we can still have conversations about things that come up here in that community. I didn't want to set up a whole other Facebook group, but feel free to ask a question or post something. We're getting a lot of engagement in that community, and it's a super fun time. And I'm trying to grease the skids or whatever, so that more people feel comfortable sharing as we get into the book. And we really are like, oh my gosh, I don't understand this, or all of that great stuff. So thank you, Anna. And so I will get my screen ready, and we will kick this off. And feel free to post questions today as well in the chat notes. It's always tricky with Zoom. So what am I doing? Okay, share screen. So you get to see my messy screen for a second. Okay, there we go. And I like this up top. It's so fun. You have to organize everything. I want the chat notes. I want faces. Okay, here we go. So let's see. We are going to talk about limiting beliefs today. And just a recap, yesterday, we talked about joy with money. If you weren't here, you can go into the link now. We're going to post everything on the same page so that it's easy to go back and get the replays that you miss, or parts of the discussions. If you want to go back, you can just adjust, because those are YouTube posted, so you can decide where you want to start back up. You don't have to watch the whole thing. We also made audio versions for everybody. And today, limiting beliefs. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about entrepreneurship. If you are interested, you have a business or a side hustle, it will also apply. Or if someday you want to be self-employed, I think all of those will fit. So that's what we'll be talking about tomorrow, and then we'll go from there. Today's objectives are to talk about why most limiting belief shifting techniques don't work, and what does work, based on me working with this for 21 years, my own self, and also with people that I've been teaching mindfulness to since 2003. And then learning about the 6 core wounds of humanity, and how they affect the relationship with money, and how they affect our belief systems, and what it takes to make big leaps with your finances and in business. And then engaging in an exercise kind of similar to yesterday's that helps you question your existing wealth paradigms. And so I am really curious, did you try the exercise yesterday? I know someone tried to write the letter to money and found that helpful, but let me know if one of those, both of them, did you try them? Let us know how that went. And if you had a realization or something, you could put that in the chat notes. It was eye-opening. What are those called? Quadrant exercise or the letter? I would be curious, Deb. So, okay, so let's go ahead and start. Oh, good. Yes, I love it. Need money mentors. I think we all do. So, okay, beautiful. So, okay, let's just take a moment, and then we'll go back to the chat if we just want to close our eyes and take a opportunity to, breathe in some nice, big, deep breaths. And let those go. Really feel when you let it go that it's just like really loosening you up, allowing you to notice any points of tension in your body. Yesterday, we talked about some of this being a bit scary. So you might even notice like you might be holding energy because you're like bracing yourself. Just notice that. And if you do, breathe into that part, your solar plexus, your root, your brain. Just breathe into that and let it go through the breath. And again, if you like to do a root lock and just feel your energy collecting into this moment, into your body, into the root of all that you are, and then letting that go. And any other grounding techniques you like. And as you relax and you become fully present in this moment with all of your awareness here now, just notice how you're feeling. Give words to that. Notice what you're wanting. What you're aspiring to and for. And as you tune into that aspiration part of yourself, maybe that came up in the exercise, just notice how that makes you feel. And the joy that that gives you in this moment. Beautiful. And we can relax our concentration and come back in to the space. That's great. So we're going to talk about limiting beliefs. And when I started thinking about what I wanted to share today, the first thing that came to me was the fact that we live in this world where everyone wants a quick, easy fix. And I think it's very telling of sort of the cultures that many of us find ourselves living in, that there's this spirit. And I think that the internet particularly has expedited this way of thinking, but it's been going on for a really long time, way beyond our lifetimes, where human beings would always love the quick, easy path. And unfortunately, very few things in life are actually solved that way. I can't think of any. I'm sure you probably could, but I have not had that sort of life where it was a quick, easy fix. And as a result, there are a lot of ideas out there that are so sexy, that sell so well, but don't actually change the paradigms that I think many of us know that we're held within and that we want to change. And like I said earlier, I have spent a lot of time, dissecting and studying and even teaching some of these techniques, ultimately to come to where I am now. And I think COVID is very interesting because it's really testing the spiritual people out there in the world, because there's a lot of stuff that we've been told or kind of promoted that is being called into question with COVID. And hopefully we'll get into some of the specifics there, but that's my take on it. And so it's causing us to think more deeply about, like, what do we really believe, and what, not just do we believe it, but is there evidence of it in our lives? Because belief without evidence is like a pipe dream. Like, I believe this, but I have no proof. It's not a really ultimately healthy way. It kind of leads to delusion when we live that way, that I believe in something, but I have no proof whatsoever. Now, the inner journey is fascinating, right? Because this is why I think, and you'll get this in the book, I didn't know when I first started writing The Mindful Millionaire that ultimately it would be a pathway of using money to find your true self, but that's what it ended up becoming. And the true self is, that even that word is subjective. It's going to be different for each of us, that experience, depending on kind of how we see the world, what we experience. But what I can also say is that there's a lot of merit to not just having belief structures, but actually testing them through time and contemplation and deep analysis of both the inner experience and the outer experience. And that's what we're playing with when we get into the beliefs. And so I want to just pull up a few of the kind of common ways that are out there that are taught and I've studied, something like think positive, or repeating mantras and affirmations over and over and over again. I'm just going to go straight to some of these. The pro with this sort of approach, that if you just think positive and you convince yourself that everything's going to be awesome, that you're just training the mind for this awesomeness, there is pro science, and I've studied all of it, that says that positive thinking and thinking that you're lucky, there's actually a lot of science around thinking that you're lucky and how that affects you, can have a favorable outcome. I'm not disagreeing with that, but I'm also pointing out that there are some cons. And this is what the research says too, that positive thinking can also go the other way. The biggest challenge with positive thinking alone is that it can decrease your desire to put in the hard work necessary to bring your goals into reality. And you're going to see this come up over and over again. So the next one, law of attraction, okay? The secret, going all the way back to probably, I don't know that Think and Grow Rich and talk about law of attraction, but Wallace Wattles did. And he also wrote a book around that same time in the early 1900s about money and building wealth. But the law of attraction is the belief that the universe creates and provides for you that which your thoughts are focused on. It's believed by many to be a universal law by which like attracts like, always attracts like. The results of positive thoughts are always positive consequences, and the same holds true for negative thoughts. So if you think negative thoughts, then it's always going to lead to a bad outcome. Kind of an interesting story on this one. When I first started teaching what I teach now 6 years ago, I either met up against the, hard and fast financial world that, this is what it looks like. You've got to save your dollars and it's all going to come through those practical, logical steps. And then I had the other camp, which was the law of attraction camp. And what I realized is I actually didn't fit into either of them. My husband and I have worked very hard. It took us 10 years to become millionaires after setting that intention. I saw what it took. I've never met somebody because I've worked with like very, very wealthy people. My closest friend inherited $100 million. I mean, I've been around lots and lots of money. And I want to be crystal clear that I've never heard somebody with great wealth talk about law of attraction. Okay. So I was like, woo, there's just two different camps out there. And what I got really curious about is, what could I stand behind? What did the research help support? But what did I also know in my own experiences of working in my own journey with building wealth, and then talking to so many people and seeing how people had done it, right? So that's what we're doing. We're looking at this middle path, and everything I teach is about that. So law of attraction, I would put on that other extreme. With law of attraction, it can be fun. It can be exciting. It can be interesting. You can have a lot of fun with it. It can cause you to believe in something you wouldn't otherwise believe in. Pretty cool. It gets you outside of your comfort zone, inspires you to think about and visualize all that you want to create. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it can also, the con is it can be dangerous because it can mislead people into believing that imagery alone will work without action. And to succeed in life, you know, this is based on my experience, you need things like talent, diligence, persistence, skills, hard work, and likely some luck. Like, it's always going to be there. That luck is a really powerful part of the process. You can achieve great things, but in order to do so, you have to do a lot more than just think positively about it. And my experience in hanging out in the spiritual circles is that that approach, this very extreme approach, can lead a lot of spiritual people to be broke. And they might feel great, they might feel awesome, but not at the moment when their bills come due. Does that make sense? I'm just going to check in because I know that there's a lot of attachment to LOA. And so I'm sorry if I'm pushing some buttons. Any comments or chat? I will watch for those.
Hey, Lisa, it's Jenny.
Hi.
I agree. I just think that the law of attraction is the law of attraction, and that's it. There are, 11 laws that I know of that are commonly known as spiritual laws, and they all work together. That's like trying to isolate one part of gardening and say, this is the thing that will cause you to have fruit. And that's bullshit. Like, it can't be one thing. It's a network of things. It's a network of aligning yourself with so many different laws that are at work in the universe. And this is one of them. And if you try to isolate it and say, this is my one thing that will cause all of the abundance, that's not reality. That's just lack of reality, So I think you can honor it and say, yes, this is true in the context of everything else. Mm-hmm. That's my take on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's going to be cases, I'm sure, we don't have to get into it, but the placebo effect, where the way that you think about things does have an effect on the outcome. But there's also downsides to having putting all your eggs in the placebo effect. That's probably not going to be what we're teaching here. So the research is very interesting as well, which, this one I picked, there's tons of these, but I just picked a few just to kind of hit home. In this case, the first one, students were asked to spend a few minutes each day visualizing with a clear image how great it would be to make a high grade on an important midterm exam that would take place in a days' time. That was one group. The other group, students were asked to spend a few minutes each day visualizing when, where, and how they intended to study. And then group 3, control group of students not asked to visualize doing especially well on exams. And in the end, students visualizing being A students studied less and made lower grades on the exam. So group 1, they felt better about themselves, but achieved less. Students visualizing, studying, prepared better, studied more, scored higher grades, and were less stressed. So students visualizing, studying, preparing better, studying more, scored higher grades, and were less stressed. So it's we can do things with our mind and our attention, but we have to be careful about convincing ourselves that everything's already been taken care of. And that's the big discerning, right? Because when you do study, those who have built wealth for themselves, it's the desire to create it that actually is the predominant thing. So commitment, permission, these are the things that are in the Mindful Millionaire. I'm talking about them, that you have to have the desire in the first place. And then you have to give yourself the commitment that I'm going to hold myself to it. And then ultimately, bringing it into action and holding yourself accountable. But that's, what we're kind of examining here. A couple other quick things was avoidance. So this was fascinating. I didn't even know about this, but as I was doing research, Wallace Wattles in his book, Science of Getting Rich, talks about like, do not talk about poverty, do not investigate it or concern yourself with it. Do not spend time in charitable work or charity movements. All charity only tends to perpetuate the wretchedness it aims to eradicate. It's like, that is disconnection, okay? Like, that's not what we're shooting for. There's merit to like compassion and opening our hearts and discovering like, how might I help people who are stuck in poverty, right? So yeah, it does. And this is stuff that this book has like been printed and sold a gazillion times, like too many to even count. And so we're just questioning some assumptions out there. The other one that's kind of a pet peeve is awareness alone. So sometimes awareness alone can make a big change, but I feel like we got to be ready for it, because merely knowing about something is a great start, but without a process of untying the knots, you become consciously aware of your incompetence, which doesn't actually change your belief system. And we're going to get into this more today, and we're going to do an exercise. But now you just know about it, which leads to more frustration and less to action. So which can create this downward spiral of a loss in confidence when things don't work out. And that's also actually a problem I have with LOA, because when you isolate LOA all by itself and then COVID happens and you lose your job, it's like, well, was I not thinking positive enough thoughts? Like, that's not fair. And that is putting yourself in a really horrible position to be feeling like you're doing something wrong. And whenever that happens with any of this stuff, please hear me, that you are not on the right path. If the thing that you're studying is actually causing you to dislike yourself more or be more frustrated at yourself, like, there's a difference. And I think this noticing the difference is the power that we gain by studying this and questioning those assumptions again and again. When is it helpful to question an assumption? And when am I just questioning myself to the point where I'm feeling bad and it's just making me want to give up completely, right? So noticing the difference between those two things.
Can I chime in, Lisa?
Sure.
We have a second. What I have found is I think a lot of successful people that I've talked to are maybe using the law of attraction without being consciously aware of it, but it's not all of what they're doing. So like, they visualize themselves being successful, they believe it's possible, and then that inspires them to go do the work, to go make the phone calls, to take the action. So it may be a piece of it, and it may be a lot of people are using it and don't realize they're using it, but I totally agree with you. I always joke that if it works like they make it seem like it works in The Secret, they would have a problem with sports cars in front of monasteries. There'd be all these monks that are like, my mind wandered, I thought about a sports car. They keep in the parking lot, you gotta get somebody to troll away. So it's not quite as simple as the way The Secret makes it seem.
Yeah, that's great. Totally. Thank you. And I'm seeing the notes. That's great. So shifting gears slightly, because it's moving from, what doesn't work to what does work. Maybe this slide isn't titled right, but belief busting, like changing the paradigm, changing the way that we think, is very serious work. And you can ask any therapist or counselor or spiritual teacher, like, when we open ourselves up, and this is really the difference between like just thinking and having it happen versus diving into like, why is it that I think a certain way? Why is the structure, the way that I am thinking about the world a certain way? And being willing to look inside of that is very sensitive work. And this is why I think it takes time. It's not a quick fix. It's not something that you want to take lightly, because when we go diving into our paradigms, we are incredibly vulnerable, okay? Because in the moment, it actually feels like nothing makes sense. In the moment, when we question our belief paradigms, it feels like, well, if this one thing doesn't make sense, then maybe nothing makes sense. And it's very sensitive work, which is why people, I think, aren't out there able to like sell this or make it like just mass consciousness. I mean, Byron Katie's done a great job of it, but if you look out there, you'll see that it still takes years of trying her work over and over again to have a big impact, because the structures and the we are so attached to our belief systems that when we start questioning them, it is for many of us, when we first start, it's like slow going and we're sort of taking it easy. And the difference between kind of the way that we've been positioned, quick fix, it's easy to change your beliefs, blah, blah, blah. I have not found that to be true in most cases, because we are questioning the whole foundation of how we believe and think. That is why we want to be very sensitive. We want to take it very seriously. If we're really serious about it, we want to be careful. Whomever is helping us, and this is really big, and this is where I take a lot of pride because it's such a big deal to me, 21 years of looking at my own paradigms, whomever is helping us during the time that we're doing this work must be free of their own judgment of themselves and of you, to be able to hold space so that more harm isn't caused for the person going through the process. Somebody?
That was me. To me, it comes in layers, and it makes us feel safe. So we have to be careful to not remove the ground under our feet in one shot, because otherwise it's very dangerous. And that's what I see with myself, with people I work with. It's in layers.
Yes, beautiful. It's part of the reason why there's so much importance to customizing solutions based on where someone's at. So one of my favorite spiritual teachers refused to even write books, because this is Nisar Gadada. He refused to write books because he was like, I am going to tell one person one thing and another person something completely different. And when people hear that, they're going to get really confused. But Muriel, this is what's going on, and this is how I run my business, is that I explain that that's going to happen, because we need to make sure that the message and the work that one person does may look very differently than another person. And the teaching and the experience needs to meet us where we're at in our own conscious awareness. Because if we don't, then we start chipping away at more than what somebody is actually ready for. And that can create spiritual emergencies that aren't actually necessary. Some people, nobody needs to go through that. There's such a beautiful pathway, and this absorption of releasing beliefs is just so phenomenal. But it is very important that we're very sensitive and we're very cautious and we respect what's going on. The other piece, and this is where all of this belief work is just so profound, and we talked about it a little bit yesterday, where I mentioned that at a certain level of consciousness, we are all equal. This is what we're all trying to understand and grow into. Like, how does that work? And how can I reach this level of understanding that we are all equal in this way of understanding? Well, I think this is what actually Albert Einstein was teaching about when he said, we cannot solve problems with the same thinking we used to create them. So the deal is that many people are trying to solve the problems that are going on in the world out there right now. But the problem is that we have not looked at our own paradigms and moved past them. So we're trying to solve other people's problems while we're still stuck in a paradigm. But as we start to learn about what it means to release some of these paradigms and no longer believe in our own lack and limitation, we start to see that nobody is actually living in lack and limitation. And from that place, outside of the problem that first started it in the first place, that is when the true healing starts to happen in our work, in the world, and the things that we show up at, because we have reached this place of understanding. And it's like super humble, because you're all the time knowing that you can only know so much. So you're very, very careful about the words that you use and the actions that you engage in, because it would be better to do nothing than to project your own unhealed nature onto, the world or the money or whatever. So thank you for these notes. I mentioned this, in higher consciousness, we're all equal. To change our belief patterns, we must be held in the spaciousness of understanding. To change belief systems from scarcity to prosperity, we can no longer believe in the idea of ourselves or anyone else as being less than. And as long as we do, we got work to do. That's why this work is kind of like lifelong work. Can I get like a amen or something? That makes sense. This is super important, and
Yeah,
it may take time.
Read the comments. You are getting lots of amens.
Okay. So back to the paradigms we were talking about. Thank you. Yesterday, beliefs cause the strategies, cause the behavior, cause the results. This is why, if you were to sum up the whole entire work inside of the Mindful Millionaire, I'm mostly dealing with beliefs. I'm touching upon strategies, and I'm planting seeds with behavior and results. But again, 350 pages, that was enough. We covered a lot. Hopefully there will be time and enough people buy my book that I get to write some more. But these beliefs are where everything's at. And that's the cool thing, that if we just realize that when we change the beliefs, then these other parts start to also change. And for each of these stages, there's protocol that we can apply. So I want to get into a little bit more, just kind of plant some seeds of belief paradigms. I truly, from the thousands of people that I've worked with, believe that limited paradigms exist as a result of not yet healing the one or many of the 6 core wounds of humanity, which create the roots of these beliefs. And the reason that these other techniques do not have the kind of impact that I have come to know and expect is because they're not getting into the roots of what caused them in the first place. So repression, denial, shame, rejection, guilt, and separation. That there are aspects in our psyche that we're very attached to that associate with one or more of these aspects. And that until we look at these parts of ourselves, we are held hostage by the beliefs. So we can say mantras all day long, and they may help us have, greater mindfulness in the outer world. But what I think really matters is, what are we doing to ourselves? What's happening inside of ourselves, whether it be physically, emotionally, in our relationships and how those show up. Like, those might be the things that are revealing themselves, even if we give this sort of facade of like, I got it all figured out, because that's kind of what we do. A lot of people do. Maybe not none of us, but actually you might not be attracted to my work if that's what's going on, quite frankly, because I think that is a discernment. The other thing that we got to be thinking about is there are a lot of reasons to keep those paradigms reinforced. I love that analogy of like the crab pot, where, a crab tries to get out of the crab pot and all the crab like pull him back in. I mean, that's one example of sort of what happens to us. We start to change, and then people are like, no, you can't go there. You're like, no. And I had this happen last week with a family member, and I think it was totally triggered by the book coming out, and it was a really painful couple days. And I was witnessing literally like the pulling back into the pot and the temptation of like believing that I shouldn't come out of the pot kind of thing. And it was like, wow, all these years of work and I'm still struggling with this theme. But repetition, confirmation bias, comfort zone, friends and family, sameness. I mean, the list is vast of all the reasons why it's not easy. Even when we know what we're wanting to do, there are these other pressures, just part of being in a society, right? And being in families and the dynamics that come up. And my husband was on the video last week with me, but like this has been a pattern over and over again, where I'll kind of take a big growth spurt, and then it is very disrupted in our home for a while until something happens, and then he ends up having the breakthrough. And we've created a very unconscious pattern with this. It's become more conscious to me over time, but it's quite amazing because now he's just like, oh gosh, here we go again. You know, it is funny, haha. But in the beginning, it wasn't that way. Like it was really, really brutal because there was no understanding of how could a person change that much in a 2-week period hit on his side. And then all the stories that come up, right? Of like, well, then she's not gonna need me anymore. She's gonna leave, blah, blah, blah. And then that creates a whole other issue that has to be dealt with. That's what's happening in our lives. And I talk a lot about this at the end of the book about like, what does your life look like now? And you are not going crazy that these things are starting to happen for you. And I just wanted to provide some like grounding and some like, I'm there with you. I get it. Like, this is really, really important. Yeah. So, okay. So this is the process. Let's see what we got next. Paradigm creation. I have a note for myself. Let's see. What was I thinking about? Okay, I know what it was. So I'll go back. This slide was just to plant a couple seeds. The reason that the I Prosper process is so oriented to changing beliefs is that I studied two of the most transformative systems that I could kind of get my hands on, both 12-step program as well as Julia Cameron's Artist's Way. And I started going, deep dive into my clients' stories of their experiences with money, and then looking at these different transformational systems and started engineering a process that was like, oh, this is what you're doing. And this is the core element of the stage that we need to go through in order to change a belief system, to question our paradigms, to help ourselves do this. And I don't know that, anything's perfect, but I tried as much as I could to give all the tools in the I Prosper process that would allow you to do this for yourself. And my sense is that, the first time through, you might just read it, part 2 of the book, you might read it just to think about it. And then the second time through, you actually go through and you start answering the questions. But I promise you that you will have one or many paradigm shifts as a result of going through that. You may also uncover some things that are like, yeah, I know something's not right and I don't know what to do about it. And that's kind of the idea of the workshops and the things that I create, is helping people, coach them through those blind spots, those things that are just so close to you that you can't see them. And many people on the call and in the workshop have received that. So this is fun to watch that. And this was the foundation of like the I Prosper method. So it works at such a deep cellular level because it's operating, both the process is created based on the chakras, as well as the individual kind of pathways that you're going to take. So it's like a map that's guiding your inner unconscious as well as your outer conscious awareness as you go. That's what you're learning. I'm sure there will be plenty of questions, and I really hope as you get into this part 2, which I think like we're coming up with, only a few people have gotten there yet, but as you come up with it, sharing that in the community will be really powerful. Here's another way of seeing. So I took the map of the chakras, smashed it up against all this transformative work that I was doing, smashed up against all that I knew about money. And that's why it's so powerful. It's got like the best of so many different things all into one to create a very seamless process that you can do over and over again.
Lisa, I have the audiobook. So is there a way to get, I don't know, PDFs?
Yeah, the audiobook has a link because we reference it in the audiobook a few times. Like you'll get this in, so it's got pictures from the book, but you also want to register. And I think you have where you get access to the freebie page, because then there's additional exercises. And then I will say one thing, we're also, does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And then the last piece is, we're not there yet, but at some point, there will be a way to like purchase sort of the workbook and some videos that go along with it, but that probably won't be until late fall. you know, because I just can tell that people are going to want more support, maybe even than the book provides. So we're working on that. It's the same thing that we'll use for book clubs too. So we're going to create a kind of a book club in a box where you could all watch videos that take you through the book, and then you talk about it and have prompts and things like that. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
How are we doing on time? Oh my gosh, time goes by so fast here. I wanted to share, but I don't think I have time. I really want to get into this exercise. So I want to talk about the exercise that you guys are going to be working on tonight. And then if we have time, I'll give you the case study, or maybe after we end. So today's exercise is all about money awareness zones, because what I wanted to do was I wanted you to, I will say this exercise is harder than the exercise yesterday. So I'm just going to warn them. But the idea is I want you thinking about the ways that your relationship with money is showing up. And I'm going to give you some examples, but this might cause you to think a bit more than even yesterday's exercise. That's my take on it. So what I realized, and we've all heard this, like I'm conscious and competent, or conscious and incompetent. Well, we're going to apply these quadrants to our experiences with money and perhaps in business. And I'm going to highlight, just like I did yesterday, how this plays out. So we're starting at the top, conscious, right? Conscious, we're aware of something that's going on in our lives. And then unconscious, this is hidden. We don't actually know that it's going on. That's why this exercise is a little tricky, because I'm going to invite you to look at some unconscious patterns, which not easy. And then on one side, incompetence, harsh word, but really what does that mean? It means I don't have enough knowledge. I haven't developed skill and mastery in something. I haven't, opened the books, done the deep dive training on something. Like incompetency means lack of knowledge, understanding, and maybe even wisdom. But I think that the conscious and unconscious is how I would sort of be thinking about like awareness and openness. So competency, I've mastered a topic. I know how this works. I know enough about it. So when we get into these different quadrants, starting on the upper left, conscious, I'm conscious to the fact that I actually don't know very much. Now, this happens a lot. Conscious that I don't know enough. And what I call this is careful. Okay. So I'm aware that I don't know enough. And this comes up a lot in the work that I do when I'm looking at belief paradigms. But one example could be, I'm afraid to take risks in my business and with my money. And there's some reasons behind that, but I think I included those in the last slide. So when we get there, I'll explain it more. I'm going to go down to the next one, which is, and so what you're trying to do, what I want you to do is I want you to spend a bit of time and think about, where are you really careful because you don't feel like you have enough knowledge or information. So this could be, I don't invest as much money because I'm not really familiar with the investing that I do. And so therefore, I'm not incentivized to save money, because when I do invest it, it makes me scared because I don't understand it. Like that would be careful. Okay, and does that make sense? That would be what goes in there. So you're just looking for those areas where you're conscious of your lack of understanding, knowledge, and mastery. Going to the next one, where we say we are incompetent and unconscious, right? This is where nobody ever really wants to be because it has this is like gambling, right? This is, I don't know what I'm doing. And I know that there's some wounds here. I've worked with a lot of people with gambling, and, parents were gamblers. And maybe they don't gamble, but there's so much fear of the unconscious patterns of growing up in a home where gambling was constantly in, the ethos of the home. And so this fear of, I don't know about it and I don't understand what's even going on underneath, in my psyche about it. So here I just said, I take risks and I don't know why things don't work out as planned. might be one way. So then the next one, oops, that's a typo. I'm going to go on to the last slide because I'm missing out on these things. So let's go to the bottom right hand corner, competent and unconscious. This one's kind of interesting. So this is when I know how to do this, and yet I'm very unconscious of the patterns that are going on underneath the surface. So this is where something, and this is where I wanted to get to sort of my brackets. I don't know what to do. I often procrastinate and I feel like my own worst enemy. So this competent, I know enough to move forward, but I don't know what's causing kind of problems under the surface. This is where limiting belief paradigms lead to self-sabotage and things like imposter syndrome. So no matter how much training we get, no matter how much competency we get, we still have these patterns that are playing out. Okay. And in that case, when things go our way, we're like, oh, I was lucky. Like there's this sense of like not full ownership of what we created. We think, oh, well, I was lucky. That's why it worked out that time, and maybe I was lucky over there, but we're not owning because the unconscious patterns are blocking us from like taking full responsibility for what's going on in our life and our business. I'm going to go back up to the left corner because I've never presented this before and I'm realizing that I made a mistake, but I want to just talk about in the situation of careful, the limiting paradigms that we deal with when we're conscious about something, but not feeling like we have enough knowledge and understanding this is where we're dealing with like not stepping into learning things. So we know that we are not skilled enough, but that creates its own paradigm that causes us to not go out and just like become a master of something. In the business world and the online business world, a perfect example of this would be, it's pretty obvious that Facebook, for me and for a lot of other businesses, Facebook is the #1 potential for increasing our business. And yet we don't go take a class and master Facebook. And for that reason, we keep thinking I can't be successful in my business because the business isn't coming in. But in reality, it's because we haven't taken the effort and the time to become competent in one of the core elements of our business. So that's great, Denise, I'll come back to that. But first, understand what I'm talking about with this careful, conscious, and incompetency. So that's really important. I think this happens a lot. And it's the beliefs under the surface that actually tell us, oh, we're not going to learn that. I can't figure that out. There's all that narrative running in the background. Has anybody ever had that happen? Where you don't try something you really know, you've heard plenty of times, and then years later, you're like, I still haven't learned that thing, and I know it would help me. That's that box. Thank you. Incompetent, unconscious. This, I think I kind of talked about this. Limiting belief patterns cause you to engage in risky behaviors, wasting money on programs that aren't a good fit. Like I've seen people do this over and over again. So you know that you don't know very much, and you're aware of your lack of understanding. And so what do? We're reckless. We're like, oh, the first person who comes in must be the right person. I'm going to give them my money. And I did this. Like I am like telling you that I did this. My first coach was $25,000 a year. And I totally did not know what I was making a decision about. I just wanted someone who was going to take me out of incompetency and unconsciousness as fast as possible. So I just wrote a big check. Okay. That's reckless. That's what we're trying to avoid. But people do this a lot. Was somebody going to say something to that? And it's okay. Oh, guilty. Oh, okay. Got it. Okay. Back to the lower one. So talking about imposter syndrome, I put a post the other day in the Mindful Millionaire community about imposter syndrome and the research that this psychologist has done about all the different scenarios that come up. Oh no, okay, I'm sorry, Katrina. We all do it, right? Yeah, we'll talk more about that tomorrow too, I promise. But the imposter syndrome. So this is fascinating. And I think women are really guilty of this. I'm sorry to be like sexist, but I see this happen over and over again. Like if anything, guys are like, I got this, I've got it figured out. Like I'm going to go try. Whereas I can't tell you how many times people are like, I need another class. I need another expert. I need somebody to give me permission. I need another degree. I need a certification. Like that is playing off of scarcity, first of all. And there's a big difference in making our decisions from a place of like empowerment versus I don't know enough. And that is like, again, you know how I'm like in the messy middle all the time, you know, like there isn't some perfect manual for the messy middle, but it's like knowing that we have a tendency to do this is enough to cause us to ask more questions about, do I really need that? Like I've read tons of books, but I've never gone to a coach's training program ever before. No, just didn't. I looked at them all, read about all of them, studied them. And I was like, nope, I have already studied so much in my spiritual journey. I felt like I couldn't get enough from those programs. You know, we each have to find our own path, but we don't want to do something thinking that they're going to give us permission to go do what we're here to do. That's one thing. Like nobody should ever be doing that. Like you give yourself permission. And it's amazing because many times, and I actually had a friend of mine who's a psychologist and a coach, and we were talking and I was like, should I go do this? Should I go do this? And this was 5-6 years ago. And she was like, Leisa, from everything I know from my PhD in psychology and the coaches training I've done, the things you're talking about, you might actually unlearn them if you go do that training. And I was like, oh, that is a really interesting thing. Like, I don't want to unlearn. I'm a disruptor. I want to go like change the whole way that the conversation is happening in the world. And so that was me knowing myself. But again, we ask lots of questions. We go to the best of the best, and we don't make decisions until we've kind of asked everybody if we need some help moving beyond imposter syndrome. So does that help?
I have a question because I know that for me, I've been coaching for years before I got certified. But when I got certified, I was conscious that it was me giving myself permission to put myself out there. And since I got certified, which was a very short, like not something expensive and long, because I've been doing that for years, like I was saying, since that day, I gave myself permission. So yes. I guess you have to be conscious of why you're doing stuff and how you're doing stuff.
I love it. Yes. Thank you. So spot on. Totally. It's not, again, it's the questioning of the assumptions. And sometimes we are going to write a check. I want to be really clear because we know that when, and I think this happens for a lot of us, like Tim and I just wrote a really big check to learn about Facebook. And I'll tell you, we are not going to miss any meetings. We are going to be there and we are going to get every penny out of that investment. That in and of itself is what money is here for, is to like make it clear that we're really, really serious about accomplishing our objectives. And it causes us to show up differently or give ourselves permission to do something. When I spent that $25,000 on my first coach, I'll be sure, like I made that money back that year. I wouldn't have probably made that money back that year without her. So, you know, bad or good, I just learned from the experience that in the end, like there wasn't an alignment and integrity. And that really played with my head because I was like, I made this decision because I was operating from this lower quadrant rather than saying to myself, this is what I know, this is what I don't know, this is what I need help on. And I may have hired somebody different as a result. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. So I want you guys to kind of look at this. I want to share a few more things. Mastery comes as a result of releasing the limiting beliefs, shifting your paradigm. I didn't really go into mastery. Mastery is competency and conscious awareness that I am competent. We are ultimately the ones who are going to tell ourselves that, but there is no question that as we work with people, you know, especially as coaches or mentors, and we really make a big impact in other people's lives, it confirms our mastery. I'm not saying that we just delusionally tell ourselves, I'm awesome at this without actually having practical experience. But what we're talking about here is the result of when we release the limiting beliefs, we shift our paradigm, we know our weaknesses, which coming back from yesterday, and I'll take those questions at the end. And then we're doing the work so that we learn that we're both conscious and competent, and we reinforce that over and over again. That's where I think all of us are trying to go. And now this is my like mic drop moment. So the other day I was listening to Richard Rudd. He's the founder of Gene Keys. And this is like a discerning moment, maybe for folks here. For me, it was big. It's like there is so much desire for that quick fix out there that people, I think, often sort of live in delusion. And what he said was, it is better to be fucked up and aware of your shadows and your weaknesses than to be thinking that you are perfect and pretending to be aware. And I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm jumping into this with you guys, but I just had to share it today because it was like, this is what we're talking about here. That we're not talking about denial of aspects of ourselves. We're talking about it's okay. I love all parts. They all have room at the table. And we're not going to be like acting like we've got it all figured out and pretending to be aware. And notice, I think this is like lifelong lesson. Like it's okay to feel that way. And it's okay to break free of the judgment, because under all of those quadrants, at the end of the day, if we go deep enough, it has to do with the judgment that we're holding against ourselves and quite possibly also projecting out into the world. So a few of the lessons today. Number one, beware of quick fix solutions. Number two, most limiting belief programs don't really work as simply. I think we could agree that it's just the simplicity of how they're presented is not quite fair to the human condition. Number three, when you want to take huge leaps in your business with your money, expect to dig deep into the roots, follow a protocol, and not only break old patterns, but also create new patterns that are really serving you for where you're at. And oh, by the way, those two that you create will most likely fall in the future because none of it is actually real in the sense of that highest realizations that we're wanting to move into. But those paradigms help us to live in the world, to operate, to be in the world and not of it, right? So we wear the, what is that teaching, Christ teaching, we wear the world like a loose garment. We don't become so attached. Once we start busting through our paradigms and our beliefs, we realize that they're helpful, but they're not the end all be all. And we become incredibly humble around our own and others' paradigms. We don't take them too seriously. We're like, yeah, this is what I believe today, but probably if you ask me a month or 6 months from now, it might not apply anymore. And that's why it was kind of hard to write a book, just saying, because I am quite sure if there are going to be times when people are going to ask me questions and be like, just know that that's where I was and now I'm here and I kind of feel a little differently. I tried to do that as little as possible, but it did happen. Okay, a few more lessons. Lesson 4. As a growth-oriented person, the trait that will take us the furthest is the ability to always see possibility where others see limitation. Okay, we can just like cement that onto our brains. We are looking to create a life where always we are reminded of the possibility and how we are not getting stuck. We're not submitting to the limitation. Number 5, there's no reason you cannot become very stinking rich, if you want to call it that, as a result of a shift in your paradigms. Because when you become a disruptor to the conformist culture and you create firsts that change social conversations, anything is possible. That may not be important to you. It is to me, but you know, it's like, it's possible when you put the time in, when you develop things that no one else has developed before. Yes, that is one of the cool things on the planet. People like fresh ideas. They like to change social conversations. Not that the money is a definition of success, but becoming wealthy brings resources, and you have money to invest and bring about massive shifts in the world as a result. Money is merely a conduit to the goodness that we want to create more of in the world. And the assignments meditation, some contemplation, the exercise, and a journaling prompt. Take some time to think about what you most want with your money in your business. Maybe I'm pushing you to think a little bigger, which would be really cool. And then list out the limiting beliefs, maybe from the exercise that you have, and consider the ways that these beliefs affect your decisions. And I'm 2 minutes behind.
Leisa, you said something that I felt my limiting belief rise up as you said, stinky rich. I was like, oh no, that's bad. You shouldn't be that way. So thank you.
I understand. So that was the end of the program today. And then hopefully you join us tomorrow, and I will stop recording and then we'll stay on for any questions that come up. I'm so glad that